When you hold FGM up to the core objectives of Islamic law or Sharia, which is the protection of life, mind, family, dignity, and faith, it fails every single one of them. It violates the protection of life because it increases maternal and infant mortality. It violates the protection of mind because it causes trauma, PTSD, and anxiety. It violates the protection of family because it destroys intimacy and increases the divorce risk. It violates the protection of dignity, causing chronic pain and humiliation for women. You're listening to Wise Women with Daisy Khan, where faith rolls up its sleeves as a force for good and where women define the future with wisdom and wonder. I'm Daisy Khan. Kindly subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Welcome to a new series, The Muslim Women Project, where I feature 100 Muslim women of power and authority, shaping their destiny, community, and society at large. Welcome back, friends. Today, we will be marking the International Day of Zero Tolerance of FGM, also known as female genital mutilation. On this day, the world focuses on ending the horrendous practice that has harmed 230 million women and girls worldwide. And I'm doing this episode because there is this perpetual myth that is associated with FGM that somehow Islam requires it. And I want to start with my own journey that actually literally started with a single question. After 9/11, like many American Muslims, I began to do a lot of outreach into the American public. I used to walk into churches, synagogues, and community centers. And in 2004, I was speaking at this beautiful church called St. Bartholomew's Church in Manhattan. And the conversation was very respectful until a man raised his hand and a Palm Pilot and asked me something that literally stopped me in my tracks. He asked me, why does Islam allow FGM with all the girls hurting out there? So I asked him to explain. And he said to me, female genital mutilation. And I told him immediately, honestly, I have never heard of this. And if I, as a Muslim woman who knows Islam, have never heard of it, there is no way this can be an Islamic practice. And today, let's talk about why this cultural practice is a gross violation of the very principles Islam was revealed to uphold. And I'm going to start with a powerful idea. Our body, the human body. It's not really just ours. It's actually considered to be a sacred trust, in Arabic, amana, from God, meaning we are its guardian and it's our obligation to safeguard it, to maintain it, to take care of it. And no one has the right, no other human being has the right to harm, alter, or violate that trust without clear medical necessity. So, this principle alone should be the end of the conversation about FGM being Islamic. So why exactly is FGM so harmful? Because it cuts the healthy, functional tissue of girls' genitalia, often between 4 and 10 years old. So the question is, if it's not Islamic, then what is it? Well, the truth is, it's so ancient that it actually has pre-religious roots. And we found evidence on mummies from the Pharaonic Egypt long before the Quran or any other scripture. And today it crosses all faith lines. It's practiced in over 29 African countries, and Muslims, Christians, Jews, and even traditional religious communities practice it. That fact alone dismantles the claim that it's an Islamic thing. But sadly, this cultural norm puts 3 million girls at risk every single day. And why does this persist when we know it's so harmful and it's so bad for girls? Often, it's defended to police morality by controlling women's sexuality. And the simple goal is to maintain purity, to preserve virginity, so that you can ensure marriageability. And the irony is that Islam does not permit harm as a tool of morality. because rules around sexuality and sexual conduct apply to both men and women. But in reality, the burden falls heavily on the girls. The main enforcer often isn't who you expect. I imagined it would be the father or the mother, but oftentimes it's the grandmother. Insisting on tradition, worrying about community standing, and sometimes the gifts that would come with the coming of age ceremony. And that is why the solution always has to include the enforcers, who are the religious leaders. Because where religion was misused to justify it, religion is the only tool that can clarify to end it. So let us actually look at the religious sources, the Quran. You will not find a single verse in the Quran that commands FGM. Not one. In fact, the Quran warns against blind tradition. It says when they are told, follow what God has revealed, they say, no, we follow what we found our forefathers practicing. And in another verse, it says, we created you in the best form, human beings. And then we human beings throw ourselves into destruction with our own hands. So, FGM violates both of these teachings. It clings to old ways, and it also destroys a sacred trust of the body. And FGM doesn't just injure the body. It actually fractures intimacy. It robs women of comfort, trust, and the ability to experience a healthy, mutual sexual life. What should be an expression of connection in marriage becomes for many women a source of trauma. And some people even try to justify this by invoking Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. But his teachings leave no room for such harm. He laid down a very clear and timeless principle. He said there should be neither harm nor reciprocating harm. He also spoke openly about the mutual pleasure and tenderness in marriage, values that FGM directly undermines. And then you will hear some people say terms like sunnah circumcision being thrown around, meaning it was the Prophet's way. But guess what? There is not a single reliable evidence any woman in the Prophet's household ever underwent FGM. There is a hadith which proponents of FGM love to cite, but this, again, is considered a very weak transmission. And Sayyid Sabiq, who is the author of the book called Fiqh Sunnah, debunked the authenticity of this hadith based on the fact that it only appears in one of the 6 compilations generally recognized as authentic. It's why major Islamic institutions like Al-Azhar made a point by stating, the use of the term sunnah circumcision is nothing but a form of deception intended to misguide people and give the impression that the practice is Islamic. And then finally, there are those people who love to compare it to male circumcision. But again, this is a false analogy. FGM removes or damages functional, sensitive tissue with lifelong consequences, while male circumcision does not. An Egyptian scholar, Dr. Suad Saleh, put it powerfully. She says FGM has less to do with male circumcision and more to do with pre-Islamic practice of burying infant girls alive, a practice that Islam came to abolish, she says. And when you hold FGM up to the core objectives of Islamic law or Sharia, which is the protection of life, mind, family, dignity, and faith, it fails every single one of them. It violates the protection of life because it increases maternal and infant mortality. It violates the protection of mind because it causes trauma, PTSD, and anxiety. It violates the protection of family because it destroys intimacy and increases the divorce risk. It violates the protection of dignity, causing chronic pain and humiliation for women. It can even violate the protection of religion because it can prevent a woman from performing ablution for the purposes of worship. So, seeing this clear harm, there has been no scholarly consensus supporting FGM. for the last 1400 years. No consensus. And this is important. Historically, only one school of thought, the Shafi, considered anything more than a minor recommendation. And they likely did so without really understanding its full harm. So in 2009, when a activist who was doing work in Africa contacted me and asked me if I could do a position paper on FGM, I brought the issue to my newly formed Global Muslim Women's Shura Council and called for a decisive position paper, one that made it unmistakably clear FGM is not an Islamic practice. And we also rejected the medicalization of FGM, meaning having a doctor do it, because that didn't make it right. This paper changed everything. Our Africa partner, Adriana Kaplan, presented the paper to 34 imams at a conference in West Africa, and when they read the research, they immediately issued a joint fatwa against the practice at that very moment. And in the Gambia, where Adriana was working, a former vice president said that the position paper was the missing piece of the puzzle that convinced the imams that FGM was not Islamic. So Adriana continued to train imams one by one, 10 at a time, 15 at a time, and community leaders and practitioners. And in 2015, the Gambia outlawed FGM. With this religious clarity, real change became possible. So I partnered with an NGO in Egypt and focused not on the shaming of people, but on providing solutions. We work with practitioners, the barbers and the midwives, by offering them an alternative, helping them to create an alternative source of income. We helped modernize a barber shop, set up a poultry shop, and even gave a loan to a guy to start a tuk-tuk business. And when I met Aisha, a former midwife, and now a proud owner of a poultry shop, she told me, now I sleep soundly. I don't hear the screams of the little girls anymore. I'm not harming anyone, and I have peace of mind. And even though the ripple effect was global, the fight is never truly over. Even though the Gambia banned FGM, a decade later, there was a major attempt by a firebrand imam to overturn the decision. And he argued that FGM was a core cultural tradition and it must continue on. So, all eyes were on Gambia. After intense lobbying, the parliament voted 34-19 to keep the ban. The vote was met with cheers and relief from women gathered at the National Assembly. Many of these women, scarred by their own experiences, vowed to protect their daughters. As one woman declared, "Over my dead body will I let my daughter suffer as I did." Keeping the ban in place is one thing. Enforcing it in communities is another. The Gambia story shows us that protecting human rights requires constant vigilance. It requires community engagement and courageous voices to speak out. And this is exactly why I'm doing this podcast. To continue that community education, to add another voice to the chorus, and to hope that more community and religious leaders will see for themselves, number one, FGM has nothing to do with Islam, and number two, FGM does absolutely no good. It only does infinite harm. And to help understand this journey from a personal perspective, I'm now joined by my guest, Mariya Taher. Okay, I'm joined by my guest, Mariya Taher. She is an award-winning social activist and writer with over 15 years dedicated to ending gender-based violence. In 2015, she co-founded Sahio, which empowers communities to end female genital cutting and mutilation. She is the winner of Human Rights Storytelling Award and L'Oreal's Paris U.S. Women of Worth Award. She contributes regularly to NPR's Code Switch, Huffington Post, and many more. So, Mariya, welcome to Wise Women.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here.
Okay, wonderful. So, In my earlier segment, I spoke about how FGM is un-Islamic from a point of view of theology, and there's no Quranic references, or, it's really a cultural practice. So I wanted to ask you specifically, when you first decided to speak out as a survivor, what gave you the courage, and did you imagine that it would eventually lead you into this national policy work that you're doing today?
That's a great question. I first started sharing my own story as a survivor. You know what? I actually don't remember the exact date. It's been a slow evolution. So it was something that I started to recognize for myself and what had happened, and even identifying it as FGMC when I was in high school and then in college. I further explored it. And then at that time, I took more of an academic lens. When I went to grad school for social work, I did my thesis on it because I had access to a community that practiced it, the community I grew up in. And I wanted to both learn more about why it was being done, and then also, particularly since it was illegal in the US, how it was continuing and what support services were out there. Slowly, I started being a writer, and I wrote about my experience and others because I wanted to show it's a very complicated form of gender-based violence that's been justified. And I say justified in quotes in many different ways, in thinking that it needs to continue in a particular community. And and really, I learned more and realized that it was a form of gender-based violence. It was sexual assault. It was something that, even though it's been thought of as being cultural, religious, and all those essence, those are just justifications again for it to continue. And I realized that people weren't talking about it happening in communities across the world as well too. So that's another reason why I wanted to add my voice, but I did it anonymously at first. And then slowly, it took me really 7 years to get to a point where I started sharing my name. And then I did a interview segment with ABC News anonymously first. That aired. And then 2 years later, when I decided to go public, they did another segment and I used my name, and I really wanted to help uplift this is happening also to those born in the US, and it's a global issue, and that we need to share our stories in order to name the harm and to be able to stop it from happening to future generations.
Yeah. So that's why I want to go to the next question, which is that many people assume that FGM, FGC only happens somewhere else, right? In Africa and whatever, other parts of the world. And when you hear that, what do you want them to know?
FGMC is truly global. There was a new report that came out in the last year that shows it happens in 94 countries around the world, including the United States. The official statistics now released by the UN show that over 230 million women and girls have undergone it. And for the first time, this statistic actually shows numbers pertaining to Asia. Most often people associate FGMC with Africa. And yes, it does happen within Africa and African diaspora communities, but it also happens within Asia, Asian communities. It happens in other communities across the globe as well too. And the 230 million now signifies those other communities that are smaller in population. It also does include, and many people don't realize this, that FGMC has been reported in white communities as well too. In the US, we have some individuals we've worked with from some more fundamentalist Christian community backgrounds who have reported it to us. Because again, I think there's misconceptions that it only happens to Muslims, and FGMC has been found in many different religions across the globe too. So it truly is this gender-based violence that does not discriminate in terms of who it could possibly impact.
Yeah, and this is why you're so busy. And I know that you've dedicated yourself to changing the conversation at the policy level. Do you want to share with us how that all got started and what this, if you had a policy win and what that moment felt like for you?
Yeah. So I've been working on policy for FGMC for years now. And the first official FGMC policy work I did was in Massachusetts. I moved here from California in 2015, and I connected with the Women's Bar Association because they had proposed legislation to both make FGMC illegal in the state, but also to create education and outreach provisions around FGMC as well, and create civil remedies for survivors if they chose to pursue those routes as well. It's a very holistic bill. And Massachusetts was at that time, well, now I should say, there are 41 states that have laws, but at that time, there are only, I think, about 20 to 25 states that had laws. And I really wanted to support the Women Bar Association and to help them ensure that they're including community voices of those that are impacted, and including survivor voices, and to ensure that the legislation that was passed was holistic in this way. It's important to make it illegal, but it's also important to recognize that we need to couple that with education and outreach as well too, and to really build a coalition of supporting organizations, from domestic violence organizations to immigrant refugee community organizations, healthcare providers, really to help uplift that this is something that the state needs to address. And it took about 5 years after I joined. They had been working for 2 years previous, so 7 years in total before the law actually passed. So it did pass in August 2020, and it was amazing to see it finally pass, but it was also a lesson in that social change can take time, and it did take time and persistence, but we were able to successfully pass the law. And then now I'll quickly mention, because there was a community education outreach provision, SAO was able to get funding in partnership with two other organizations to create state awareness around FGMC and really look at programming. We just started that program last year, and we're going to have an official launch of that program on February 6th as well too. But it's just, again, just seeing that progression from that law. And even though it's been years since the law passed, finally getting to this point is amazing to see as well.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, I'd heard something about a case that took place in Massachusetts. Are you aware of that case? Do you remember what happened there?
The only case that I know about was one, I think that happened in the 90s, where there was a person that was involved and they were worried. It was a custody case where they were worried about if their father had been given rights, that because those in-laws practice FGMC, the children could be subjected to undergoing FGMC. That case happened in 2017, and it was the first time under US federal law that a person was charged with performing FGMC. It happened in Michigan, and it was a doctor who was charged with performing FGMC from girls who were crossing state lines and coming into Michigan at a clinic there.
Yeah.
And over time, it was found that dozens of girls had been coming there. And some media reports came out that hundreds of girls could have been impacted by this as well, too. That case broke many stereotypes because the doctor was somebody who was US born, educated here as well, too, came from a well-to-do background, community, came from a South Asian background as well. And so it was just a lot of perceptions, again, that FGMC only happens in Africa, happens to low income or uneducated individuals. And not to say it does not happen in those circumstances, but violence can happen and impact all communities and backgrounds. And so this case uplifted that this, again, is something that is US inherent, and that we need to create education awareness for it as well here. And since then, many survivors have come out from all different backgrounds as well too. So that really elevated the conversation in the US that we need to address FGMC in this country as well.
Yeah, yeah. And it's sort of like considered to be like a rite of passage, right, for girls.
Yeah, yeah. Or it's
Yeah,
an identity marker or something you
yeah,
have to do for
yeah.
marriageability. Yeah.
And everything that I have researched, it's all harm and no gain whatsoever. So,
Right.
anyway, so I know that you're so brave and so courageous, and that's why I'm having you here today. Really, it's people like you that actually create the change, but from the work that you've just mentioned. But oftentimes FGMC is literally surrounded by silence, right? And how are you working within communities to break that silence and to really start an honest conversation?
Yeah. One thing I learned early on was that silence had a huge impact on changing norms around FGMC or beliefs around FGMC. And I'm mentioning that because really recognize me and the other co-founders of SEO that one of the biggest reasons FGMC was continued was people were not talking to one another about it. And there was a belief that everybody was doing it. There's a term in social psychology, I mean, pluralistic ignorance. So the idea that everyone is doing it and everybody wants it to continue, but no one is really talking to each other about it. And we did a study really in the beginning of our organization's history just to understand how prevalent FGMC was in the community that 4 of the 5 co-founders belong to, the South Asian community we grew up in, because it wasn't known that it happened in this community, not as publicly as it is known now. And we found that 80% said that they had undergone it, and there were 380 individuals, I think, who took it, if I remember correctly. And then we found that 81% said that they didn't want it to continue. And so we wondered, well, if so many people don't want it to continue, why does it continue? And that's when we started to learn we need a platform where people can come together to share their stories. And our approach has really included the idea of storytelling.
Yeah.
So creating safe spaces where individuals can gather, they're not feeling judged, or that if they speak up against this, that they will be ostracized from the community, which are repercussions that can happen. And we have heard stories about that. And one of the reasons or motivating factors for why FGMC continues is that sense of needing to belong to this community. And sometimes there can be social sanctions, economic sanctions as well if you go against your leaders in your community as well. And so we created those safe spaces. We have a digital storytelling workshop where we bring individuals together, all different backgrounds, and they get to talk to one another and create these digital stories in ways that feel comfortable for them. So some of them might talk about the experience of undergoing FGMC. Others talk about visiting the OBGYN for the first time and what that was like. Someone might talk about their relationship with their mother in this, but it's the idea is to help uplift all the complicated nuances of FGMC and how it impacts the survivor, and use those as teaching tools to further create prevention, but also train service providers like healthcare providers how to give care. And so that storytelling has really helped us to break the silence and really elevate this conversation too. And now we're hearing more stories about people stopping the practice in their family or ending that cycle, but then also the survivors who get support in ways that they're like, we just never could talk to anyone about this before. And that's been amazing to hear.
There are many survivors out there, not just in the United States, who may be listening or feeling completely alone and unsure of what to do. What do you want them to hear from you today? And where can they go?
Yeah, survivors around the world who are listening in, they are welcome to visit our website. It's sayo.org or SAHIYO.org. And you'll be able to find a lot of resources, tools, information about, we're on social media at Sayo Voices. That's our handle for pretty much every platform out there. And connect with us, email us, message us. We want to hear from you. And really, I want survivors to know they're not alone. And one of the reasons SAO was founded was to be able to be there for those who do need that support and reach out. And we want to meet people where they're at in terms of what kind of support and resources they might need as well. And I just thinking about the relationships that have developed over the years and that have continued to today. Sayo is now 10 years old, which I can't believe also because
Congratulations.
thank you. I definitely feel like I accidentally founded an organization. And over the years, I never thought about how the organization would help individuals to connect and develop relationships and friendships that have really been essential to their own healing journeys. And that's something I've been really reflecting on this past year or two, especially. And we're here for you. So please feel free to reach out, is what I'll say to anyone who's a survivor that's listening, and just know that you're not alone in your experience.
Yeah. So back to the United States here, because you founded this organization here to address the issue here in the United States. Is there something else that you think needs to be done here in the US to draw attention to really end FGM in the US?
I think, well, there are, again, 41 states that have laws, but they're all very different. Not each, there are 9 states that need laws. We're working in Connecticut and have been for 5 years, for instance, to try to pass a law. We are very hopeful that it'll happen this year. But additionally, not all states have that education outreach provision. I do think it's important to make clear that FGMC is illegal. And part of that is because to change social norms, domestic violence is illegal. We know that homicide is illegal. We know that those things still continue, but we need to set as a society that this is not acceptable. With that, we do need that education outreach provision, because changing people's minds and thoughts will not happen with making it illegal alone. You need that other piece. And I think that's something here in the US we need a lot more of, is the education outreach and just letting survivors know what resources you can go out to. I get calls all the time where people are like, is there anything in this state? And I don't oftentimes know, unfortunately, and I wish I did know more resources, and we're working to try to get people to build more resources. But yeah, I think education is so important.
And I completely agree with you, because when I got started with my work in Africa, we started in Gambia, and my partner in Gambia was just going from imam to community to health workers to NGOs, and basically just educating everybody on the harm that this practice does. And the result was we got fatwas from imams, and eventually the practice was banned. But you recall that the imam who tried to overturn it, and all our eyes were on Gambia.
Yeah.
But because so many people had been educated on this topic, right? All of those people rose up against it. And that's how we were able to make sure that the ban, was not overturned. So education is so important. I really want to thank you for being a pioneer. You just knew there was a gap, and you entered that gap with courage and leadership. And again, for all those who are listening, it just shows what's possible when people lead the way. So your voice continues to create this space for others to speak and heal and shape the future. So I want to thank you for all the work that you've done, and for being an amazing woman. And if there's anything you'd like to say to our audience, I'll let you have the last word.
I'll just thank you, Daisy, for everything you said, and also to the audience. I really hope you will listen and you will take away what we've been talking about. And if it moves you to action, reach out. The first step to making a change is learning more about the issue too. So Google it, come to our website, learn more, and connect with us. And let's make a difference. Let's end FGMC.
Let's end it forever.
Forever.
Thank you so much. And until next time, I'm Daisy Khan, your host.
Thank you for joining me on Wise Women. If something stirred in you today, don't let it stop here. Share this episode with someone who needs it. Reflect on what resonated for you, and definitely plant one seed of change, however small. Remember, you do matter, and your actions have a ripple effect. But none of us can rise alone. To explore more resources and ways to get involved, do visit my website, daisycon.com. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, because every click is your way of amplifying this message to others. Wisdom isn't just heard, my friends, it's lived. So let's live it. Until next time, stay wise and stay rooted.